Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, well, he's pled guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. This is Special Counsel Robert Mueller's prosecutors say in court papers that Flynn is cooperating now with the Russian investigation. Meanwhile, President Trump today again declared that there was no collusion between the Russians and his campaign. And the president tweeted this, quote, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies. It is a shame because his actions during the transition were lawful. There was nothing to hide." So what do we make of all this? Stephen Mulroy joins us, former federal prosecutor, University of Memphis law professor, and a criminal defense attorney. Stephen, welcome tonight. This tweet, some people are making a big thing out of it, saying, well, the president may have known that he lied to the FBI, then he tried to get rid of Comey and this sort of thing. I mean, he already said that he knew that Flynn lied to the vice president. That's why he fired him.
Well, that's certainly what he claims, and I think that's maybe even true. But I think the larger problem for President Trump is that given that there are so many more charges that Flynn could have been slapped with, the fact that he got such a light charge, just the one charge of false statement, means that it must be the case that Mueller thinks that not only is Flynn cooperating, but that he has very valuable information to provide Mueller. That can't be good news for President Trump.
Well, I mean, some people would say it's the opposite of that. Let me read you what Andrew McCarthy, former federal prosecutor, wrote in National Review. He says, quote, "While initial reporting is portraying Flynn's guilty plea as a major breakthrough in Mueller's investigation of potential Trump campaign collusion with the Russian regime, I suspect the opposite is true. When a prosecutor has a cooperator who is an accomplice in a major criminal scheme, the cooperator is made to plead guilty to the scheme. That is not happening in Flynn's situation. If it were part of the basis for a collusion case arising out of Russia's election meddling, then Flynn would not be pleading guilty to a process crime. He'd be pleading guilty to an espionage conspiracy." I mean, what about that? I mean, is this the tip of an iceberg or much ado about nothing, getting Flynn on this one charge versus something that's even bigger?
Well, Eric, we won't know whether it's the tip of an iceberg or much ado about nothing until later on, but I will take issue with Mr. McCarthy's analysis. This is no ordinary prosecution. This is a very unusual prosecution, and it may very well be that Mr. Mueller wants to keep his cards close to his vest for the time being and hold off on revealing too much about what he knows because he wants other people to come forward and cooperate as well. So given the fact that there were so many charges that he could have used and he used only one relatively minor charge, that suggests to me that Mueller must think that Flynn has got some useful information. And I do think this is significant, Eric, in that for the first time, the Russia scandal, if you will, is inside the White House. It's the National Security Advisor. It was someone relatively close to the president who was involved with this. Sarah Huckabee Sanders will no longer be able to say, oh, it was a low-level person like Mr. Papadopoulos, or it didn't really relate to the Trump administration itself, like with respect to the charges regarding Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates. So I do think this is a bit of a game changer here.
But then others are saying, look, this was after the transition. It was not the election. The president had already been elected, and that Flynn was being directed or taking it upon himself, basically, to reach out to foreign leaders. Reports saying that Jared Kushner was involved in this, perhaps, and others down in Mar-a-Lago, and that this was all part of the transition team reaching out. Let me play you what the president said about this. You want to say something? Go ahead.
No, I wanted to agree with you. I mean, I think you're making a good point in that we don't yet have any smoking gun evidence that suggests that ties it to something that was going on during the campaign with respect to Mr. Flynn. If that information comes forward, then that might be another thing. But as it is right now, we've got no smoking gun evidence involving Mr. Trump personally with the Russians during the campaign, nor do we have information about stuff happening at least with respect to Mr. Flynn, during the campaign as opposed to the transition period. So, you know, we do have some information about other contacts with high-ranking people like Mr. Manafort, Trump Jr., Jared Kushner during the campaign. But with respect to Mr. Flynn, there's that one missing piece. Will that information be coming forward? We don't know. Stay tuned.
Well, you know, in February, the president said that, you know, this is his job. His job is to reach out to the Russians as part of the transition team, which has happened before in other administrations. Let me play you what the president said on February 16th.
Can you say whether you are aware that anyone who advised your campaign had contacts with Russia during the course of the election?
Well, I told you, General Flynn obviously was dealing, so that's one person, but he was dealing as he should have been.
During the election?
No, nobody that I know of.
So you're not aware of any contacts during the course of the election?
How many times do I have to answer this question?
Can you just say
Russia
yes or no
is a
on it?
ruse. Yeah, I know you have to get up and ask a question so important. Russia is a ruse. I have nothing to do with Russia. Haven't made a phone call to Russia in years.
Well, Flynn was apparently tasked to talk to the Russians about ISIS. I mean, is that a violation of the Logan Act, you know, that 1799 law, or is it something that, in general, is legitimate to be able to talk to foreign leaders before you take office?
Well, Eric, it might be both. It might technically be a violation of the Logan Act, and that while he was still a private citizen, he was actively engaging in diplomacy with a foreign power. And at least in one respect, with respect to that UN resolution on Israel, it was actually against the policy of the American government at the time. So I think, you know, there is maybe some grounds for objection there. But I think your larger point that it wouldn't be unusual for an incoming administration to want to have some communication with foreign leaders, that's certainly true as well. And I think it's going to depend on the details, and particularly that point you raised earlier about what exactly was happening during the campaign itself. You just heard the president make a flat denial that he wasn't aware of any such contacts. We have heard that there were some contacts with other people like Paul Manafort, Eric Trump Jr., and Jared Kushner. The question is, what did the president know at the time of the campaign? We still don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, maybe referring to the Donald Trump Jr., you know, meeting with that Russian lawyer.
Yeah,
so,
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, so
yes,
certainly,
yes.
I mean, there's a lot here to unpack, and certainly the investigation will continue and be ongoing. You'll see how it goes. By the way, Stephen, in about 20 minutes, we have former Israeli Ambassador Dan Gillerman to talk about that Israeli resolution on Israel at the UN that the Obama administration abstained, and the Trump transition team apparently wanted to delay or at least veto. Steve Morey from Memphis, thank you for joining us this afternoon tonight
Thank you,
on the
Eric.
Fox
Take
News
care.
Channel. Of course.